height of the Black Lives Matter protests over the killing of George Floyd on police accountability, and now are unwilling to deliver on those very same commitments. But we're all here to say that we're going to hold them accountable. Am I right? Am I right? Am I right? Am I right? We got to hold our elected officials accountable to the demands that we make on the streets. We shouldn't expect that these very people would act in the best interests of communities most impacted. And I say that as an elected official myself. There is work that we need to do. Last year we passed sweeping police reform, but I was one of the few voices that said that that was not enough because I recognized that it didn't go far. And there's still work that we need to do. And tonight, before I leave here, I want to point out some really important pieces of legislation that I believe represent the unfinished work of police accountability in Maryland that we all have to be fighting for. But we must first educate ourselves. We must first organize, and recognizing that our liberations are inextricably linked to the white folks that are here, to the non-black folks that are here, understanding that the very same system that dehumanizes black and brown folks is the same system that dehumanizes women, that dehumanizes immigrants, that dehumanizes working poor people, that dehumanizes people with disabilities. That is the same system that we have to dismantle. Am I right?
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah.
So tonight, we're going to talk about a couple of things. The first thing is ending qualified immunity in state court. And that's important because we got to send a clear message that officers can be held accountable in the place that we hold people accountable, and that's in our courts, our criminal legal system. But we're not going to talk about that tonight. But what we have to realize is that ending qualified immunity is important because other states have done it, and Maryland should have led on it as well. And so I introduced a bill that would end qualified immunity in state court, and it is House Bill 463. Remember that bill number. Call your legislators, talk with them, tell them that what they did last year wasn't enough. We don't want performative wokeness. And that's what we see a lot of. People will use social justice buzzwords, but when it comes to legislation and the real impact and the demands that communities are calling for, you're not willing to go that far. If you're not going to help us, then get out of our way. The second thing is white nationalism in law enforcement. Sisters and brothers, family, I want to bring you all attention to an issue that isn't talked about, but is just as serious as police accountability, and that is white nationalism in law enforcement. Congressman Jamie Raskin from Maryland, his committee released a report on white nationalism in law enforcement, an unredacted FBI assessment. And it showed that white nationalism has not only permeated law enforcement in the United States, Maryland is certainly not exempt, but it has grave implications for public safety, for communities, not just black and brown, but our Jewish communities, our immigrant communities. White supremacy is a dangerous doctrine, and no one is safe from it. And so it should be our responsibility to root out white nationalism, and I've introduced a bill that will do just that. And that bill is House Bill 524.
524.
Remember that, sisters and brothers. The next issue is ending no-knock warrants.
Yes.
The Democratic caucus committed to ending no-knock warrants, and we did not. What we ended up doing was reforming no-knock warrants and continuing a dangerous practice that not only puts civilians but law enforcement in a dangerous standoff.
That's right. That's right.
That has to end.
Yeah.
We saw recently with Amir Locke in Minneapolis, shot right where he slept, executing a no-knock warrant. Breonna Taylor, so many others. This is the unfinished work. So I've introduced a bill that would also end no-knock warrants, and that is House Bill 532. Say House Bill 532.
House Bill 532.
I hope you all remembering this.
Yes.
This is the unfinished work. It is not enough to show up and demand change. This is what it looks like. Are you willing to make the sacrifices that Black and brown communities who have been impacted by police violence and for too long have been making these sacrifices? This is not new, but we have to demand better of our legislators and stop assuming that because we are a democratic state, that means that we're passing the necessary legislation. We got to fight for it. Am I right?
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes.
Am I right? All right. The next issue is protecting minors during interrogation. How many of you all are familiar with the Central Park Five or the Exonerated Five? In many states throughout the country, including in Maryland, it is perfectly legal for police to lie and deceive minors during an interrogation. And this is not only wrong, but we are setting up our young kids, particularly those who are Black and brown, to be caught up in a criminal legal system that does not recognize their humanity. And so we must end this practice of deception because our young people are particularly susceptible to these police deceptive tactics. We saw what happened with the Exonerated Five, and we're not going to let one more happen in our state. Am I right? Am I right? Am I right?
That's right.
So I introduced the bill on that.
That's right.
It's House Bill 1374. Say House Bill 1374.
House Bill 1374.
All right. The other issue, and I'll end here, but I'll say this. Police in schools is an issue. This is an uncomfortable conversation, but a conversation that nonetheless we must have.
Yes.
This is where solidarity shows up. Because not according to me, but the Maryland Department of Education, while Black students account for 1/3 of enrollment in our public schools, they account for over 40% of all arrests, a majority of which for minor infractions. We are perpetuating a school-to-prison pipeline that siphons Black, Latinx, LGBTQ+, students with disabilities from the classroom to the jailhouse and enforcing young people to navigate a criminal legal system. That shit has to end. Am I right?
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes.
So we're going to keep an eye on police-free schools because that's the next step, because too often people think that an armed police officer patrolling schools means safety. We got to invest in the proven solutions that will keep all of our kids safe, like counselors, behavior specialists, more nurses, better paid teachers, restorative justice practitioners, the people who will not see our kids as inherent criminals. Last issue, are y'all still with me?
Yes.
You still with me?
Yes.
All right, it's prosecutorial accountability.
Yes.
We don't talk about that enough. We elect states' attorneys and attorney generals who are, by law and the function of their office, supposed to use the law to seek accountability on behalf of the public, but particularly those that are vulnerable. But that has not been happening when we talk about police violence. According to Mapping Police Violence, say Mapping Police Violence.
Mapping police violence.
Take a look at it. The U.S. criminal legal system declines to prosecute 97% of cases of police brutality. Only 1% result in a conviction. And when they do get a conviction, it is often lesser for civilians who commit similar crimes. These are people we elect. These are people we should be holding accountable. These are people who are claiming that Black Lives Matter. But I don't want to hear you say Black Lives Matter if you're not supporting the policies that will make that statement true. Am I right?
That's right.
Am I right?
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about prosecutorial accountability. And what my bill ensures is that we are overhauling the relationship between prosecutors and the Fraternal Order of Police and police associations. The very players in our elections, the people who elect your state's attorneys, and then they find it so difficult to then prosecute the officers that inflict harm and damage on our communities. There is a sinister coalition there.
Yes.
The relationship between law enforcement and prosecutors, but particularly the FOP, is incestuous.
Absolutely. Come on.
And so what that means is that we need to be shedding a light on the people who are not just taking their money, but ensuring that those very same prosecutors are then recusing themselves from any police misconduct or police brutality case. And I have a bill for that.
Absolutely. Bring it.
It's House Bill 1373. Say 1373.
1373.
It ensures that any prosecutor that takes dollars from police associations or groups must recuse themselves from investigations and prosecutions of police misconduct cases. That shit has to end. Am I right?
You're right.
Am I right?
You're right.
So let's continue to fight. Let's continue to organize. Organizing is the tool of the oppressed. And this is what we must continue to do in coalition with other groups so that we can fight for the policies that really matter in our communities and not the gimmick stuff that they pass and then sell to us. Thank you.
Thank you.